Hey, listeners, I'm Anita Sharma, and welcome to my podcast, Signed. I'm an entertainment lawyer, and I am lucky enough to represent some of the most incredible and innovative digital-first content creators in the world. This episode is a special one. I got to sit down with Alyson Stoner, and we had an incredibly wide-ranging conversation, beginning with Alyson's years as a Disney child star and their, recovery from that experience, moving into adulthood and, becoming an advocate for child actors and for kidfluencers, becoming a New York Times bestselling author, with their recent book called Semi-Well-Adjusted Despite Literally Everything. I actually think Alyson is incredibly well-adjusted, but still one of the best titles I've ever heard. And I was just incredibly inspired by them. And, I hope you are too. It was an amazing conversation to have. Today's episode, Alyson Stoner. Signed, Conversations with Digital Mavericks. Welcome back to Signed, Conversations with Digital Mavericks. Today we have a multi-hyphenate guest on the program. They are a singer, actor, dancer, mental health practitioner, and recently a published author. They've acted in films like Cheaper by the Dozen, 1 and 2, Camp Rock, 1 and 2. You may have also seen them on TV shows like The Sweet Life with Zach and Cody, and they are currently voicing the character of Isabella in an all-new season of Phineas and Ferb. They've also served as a prominent backup dancer for many artists, like the coolest ever Missy Elliott, appearing in the video for the iconic song Work It. And their memoir, Semi-Well-Adjusted Despite Literally Everything, is out right now. Welcome to the podcast, Alyson Stoner.
Hello, my lovely lawyer.
So I'm so excited to have you. We've been working together for a few years now, and it's been so incredible to see your evolution, all these different areas that you've branched out into, and I can't wait to delve into it. So let's start kind of, at the beginning, as they say. So you were a child performer, you were a Disney star. You were so highly successful at a very young age. And so how did that all start? How did you become a performer at such a young age?
I think what happened in my family of 3 kids, my parents thought it would be convenient if we could drop off as many of them as possible to the same location. So when my older sister was taking class at a local dance studio, I followed suit. Our middle sister didn't want anything to do with it after the second ballet class. She was more of, put me on the football field or on a baseball diamond. But I started competing in what many folks know as the competitive dance space, just like any competitive rec sports leagues. And around age 7, I attended a convention in New York, and I was completely unaware that it was an entertainment recruitment funnel. I assumed it was similar to other conventions, one and done type of thing. But after several categories during the course of a week, the feedback, kind of demonstrated people were quite insistent that we try it out in LA and meet with agents and managers. And while I know they don't treat every child in that way, I do now, as an adult, understand that there were lots of incentives for people to commit to relocating their life and investing in this industry. And lots of folks in the ecosystem were getting some form of a kickback, whether right away or later on. So I would say around, I was 7, I started auditioning, and you can call it a bit of beginner's luck or, give lots of credit to my trusted teachers and choreographers who really prepared me with these showmanship skills, etc. But I booked a job pretty quickly, and what that did was it microwaved the process of my family needing to make a lot of big decisions. Does that mean we need to relocate the family? Does that mean Alyson needs to be pulled out of school? And so it was sort of breakneck speed overnight. And then it truthfully never stopped until I started facing other health concerns around 18 years old. But there was over 10 years of just hamster wheel, rat race, no breaks.
It's interesting because everybody wants that kind of success, right? That's what everyone in this business is working towards. And it seems like you got that. But then, like you said, you got on that hamster wheel for 11 years. It's a long time. So, you're really open about everything that you experienced as a child performer, and sort of how it affects you today and how it affected you then. And, in 2021, you wrote that People op-ed, and this term is just incredible, the toddler to trainwreck industrial complex. That just makes my heart break just reading it, because I'm like, oh, wow, like that's just, you went through that and you talk about it in such an honest way. And your documentary that's out on YouTube called Dear Hollywood. I mean, I saw 17 episodes. Is there 22 episodes?
There are many episodes, yes, and I penned each and every word, and it's delivered as a monologue. So if you're not sick of my voice after this, you have to go check it out and listen.
Yeah, and we'll definitely link it, and we'll throw it up on the screen right here as we're talking. But yeah, I listened to every episode. I thought it was incredibly compelling, but also so honest and so vulnerable. And so what compelled you to create those pieces, the op-ed, the documentary?
I noticed that many former young performers had come forward with stories that demonstrated this repeated pattern of some kind of downward spiral. And I also recognized that they were usually delivered in some form of sensationalized media where folks could still consume their life story as purely entertainment without ever having to think twice about intervening or trying something different to protect future generations. And what's fascinating is how a screen between two people can create this illusion of separation where we're able to either glorify the person on camera or dehumanize them, tear them down, but we still feel a distance, even though it's truthfully made up. All of our lives are deeply interconnected in so many ways. And so I wanted to peel back the curtain further for people and let them in on the rest of the context that usually gets omitted. And the truth of the matter is, if we only ever present the highlight reel, in this case, when children are involved, we're actually leaving room for a lot of harm to be happening behind the scenes without anyone realizing. And even more, if the child is presented as this quote unquote reckless, entitled, privileged kid actor, then it becomes even harder to empathize when you hear what was actually happening, when you get the rest of the story. So I wanted to make sure that I not only shared some of my own experiences, but now as a mental health practitioner, I can present ideas in more structured ways where we can reflect on these things, not just on behalf of child performers, but also thinking about the young ones in our lives, thinking about our own childhood and all the myths that shaped our, aspirations for quote unquote fame, success, purpose, and what we can do differently to create just healthier systems and spaces for people to exist.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things you talked about, like especially because I have young kids and I imagine them in these scenarios, but the things that you point out that people don't think about, like one thing that really stuck with me was this idea of like you're this kid and you're on a set and this is your family. This is considered, everybody's like, oh, we're family, and you develop these relationships so quickly, and then the project ends and you're just like expected to move on. And for a child, like that is so hard to understand and to process in, that it's really traumatic and really damaging. And that's something that, we wouldn't, like the average person just watching you on screen wouldn't think about.
Well, it's interesting that we have grown actors come forward and talk about how enrolling into certain characters lingered with them. They experienced what some might call emotional bleed off and blurred lines between their identity and the characters. And we see these negative outcomes, but when we think about a child who doesn't yet have their own sense of identity, whose brain cannot, use critical thinking or complex logic and reasoning, whose brain also can hardly differentiate fantasy from reality, you start to see just how vulnerable of a situation it is for a young person to be enacting these scenarios surrounded by adults who are in on it. We're all committing to this false reality, but the emotions are real, and what's happening in your nervous system gets stored as a real lived experience without ever presenting helpful tools and structures for us to be able to go, oh, wait, okay, this is the job. So now I'm doing this job. Okay. And now I'm off camera. I'm returning to myself. Who am I? Okay, great. And how can I process that energy and head home and return to some kind of sense of normalcy? It's just the industry, it sort of disrupts every possible component of child development. If you're not in school or you're not around peers your age, or the only kids you're around are fellow performers or fans, you're missing out on this kind of quote unquote normal socialization. And then finances is a whole other factor. And the simple way of stating it is adult workplaces with adult expectations are not going to be developmentally appropriate for children, even if all of the adults in the room have really good intentions and really big hearts and they're wanting to be supportive. So that's where I see a lot of room to shift some of the industry practices. And it's not to just name, shame, blame one person or one studio. It's to say, listen, y'all, I didn't expect you to be trauma therapists or child development experts, but now that we know better, let's do better, especially if more kids are going to be involved through digital media.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what's so great about your work in this space, your advocacy work, because I don't think you're trying to say, you could easily have been that person who was, communicated this in a way that's very angry and wants to shame people and wants to point the fingers of blame. And, but the way you're doing it is in a way that's very constructive, and the way I think that you're talking about, even though it's such a difficult, painful thing that you went through. And I think that's kudos to you, because more people are going to listen, and hopefully in the industry, more people will listen. I mean, you've talked about being the president of a corporation as a child. I mean, with your own company and people depending on you. And it's just crazy to think about that.
Of course. I mean, signing a contract with the title of president under my name before I could write in cursive was just absolutely bizarre. And of course, I didn't know what that meant. And I didn't even know who all was involved in my finances and business management. So, and there's...
I mean, you wouldn't even have known what questions to ask.
Exactly. And my family, you've got to make a lot of decisions as the parent and the guardian about how much you talk about money, how much you focus on the fun of it, how much you expect your child to be a breadwinner. Every family is going through a very unique set of factors, but no matter how you slice this pizza, it's a tough one to find any semblance of normalcy and solidity in how things unfold. It's just there are too many risks, too many areas for something to go awry. And even when I thought I was protected, I ended up experiencing similar mismanagement of my own money.
Yeah, it's really, kind of stunning to think about. And so I wanted to touch on, you brought up something about this. I've also heard you talk about, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, but just being a kid in that environment and learning like skills like brushing your teeth and brushing your hair, and how that you didn't have that because you were, surrounded by like a hair and makeup person or this, people to sort of take care of that for you. And I thought that really stuck with me as well.
Yes, it's a precarious way to be when you are overdeveloped in so many ways, with, you're living into adult responsibilities and you're expected to show up with emotional maturity. And really as a child, since technically neurobiologically, you're still hardly understanding what big feelings are and how to manage them. Really, any child who on the surface seems like the most obedient and well-behaved child usually is learning some kind of strategy around people-pleasing or neglecting their own needs in order to maintain peace, but we're then viewed as being mature adults. And I think that's important to name. I can't tell you how many times people referred to me as a reliable veteran on set. And
as a child.
Yes, right. And in many ways, I did often have more work experience than some of the adults on set. However, my stage of development was still so early. And so on the flip side, I lacked some of the normal and expected, dare I say, healthy biological developmental milestones, and some of the simple tasks, like you're mentioning, remembering to brush your teeth, remembering to brush your hair, knowing how to put an outfit together. And I remember later on feeling so self-conscious anytime I tried to interact with people my age, because I could talk about world politics if needed, and I could deliver a speech on a stage for 100,000 people. But if you asked me just what I thought was fun, cool, hip, trendy, what songs I listened to, what kind of jeans I like to wear, I just had no social skills, no reference points. And so I think that's, it's a bittersweet way of being able to name the specialness of these once-in-a-lifetime experiences and the simultaneous sacrifice of all the other aspects of my childhood.
Right.
And some people ask, like, how does it feel to have been recognized at such a young age? And I have to say, you all, I don't know anything else. After age 8 or 9, and since then, everywhere I go, every single day of my life, there will be someone who stops me, asks for a photo, leaves a comment, whatever the case may be. I truly don't have any other experience of being alive after age 8, which is baffling.
Yeah, and it's so true. I mean, you are a well-known name. I mean, you were that Disney star. So, and then obviously went on to do other interesting work. What can the industry do better for kids? Like, is there a scenario where a kid should be on a set? Because obviously we still need kid actors. So what do you think the industry can do better?
So currently on set, and some strides are being made, we can introduce base level trainings for any adult in the ecosystem who will be working with minors. You can formalize that to whatever degree you want. Maybe everyone has to pass this little test. Great. Mm-hmm. Or it can be more informal, but just something that happens at the start of productions. And I'm not just talking about best practices like, try not to swear. We're talking about ideas like bodily autonomy. If you and your job, if your role on set is going to be interacting intimately with the child in terms of being up and close in their personal space, perhaps having your hands on their body if you're placing a mic pack or if you're doing their hair and makeup, making sure that there can be a conversation, a two-way conversation, and actually really three-way because a guardian should be present in determining what's safe, comfortable, manageable, and what can be said if on any given day the child maybe is saying, actually, we don't know what people are showing up to work with. We don't know what they're going through at home. Perhaps something really, really vulnerable happened, and now they're feeling, an increased sensitivity. How can they communicate that and know that it will be respected by the adults who are aware of their agency as a child, even though we also have to, protect and steward and provide guidance. So some training overall. Also, I am now a certified mental health coordinator, and that means I can support film, TV, stage productions, and audiences by helping bring the story to life in a compelling way, but also an ethical way. So I can analyze scripts and make sure, that the child perhaps doesn't need to be on set for certain parts of that scene, or can we, if the team wants to be collaborative creatively, can we adjust what angle the camera is facing for certain sequences so that maybe the child doesn't have to be exposed to some of the violence or, any of the other intense themes. So I can help analyze scripts for opportunities around portrayal and kind of creating content warnings the day of on set. So if you read the call sheet and you see, we're going to be documenting, or there's going to be a scene that involves a lot of loud explosions. Well, now everyone on that set, including the young people and the guardians, understand, okay, that's going to be here. There's also a coordinator if I need some extra support, or maybe I don't need to be on set watching this scene. I can step away and be in the trailer or in the schoolroom. So a lot of minor shifts that amount to a very different daily experience. And then labor laws, of course, are such an area.
The entertainment business is it's ripe for abuse. I mean, it's just crazy.
And I think what's interesting about the cultural phenomenon of child stardom is that we hardly ever, if at all, call it child labor. And that is reflected also in federal law, that child stars, child entertainers are exempt from the protections. So I think, many people find that fascinating, that it's up to each state to establish protections, and that there are still 17 states who don't have a single law for this. Yet, guess what states have smart devices and content of children? Every single one of them. So, there's a lot of room to do advocacy work in the policy arena, and that brings us to the digital space.
Yeah, and I definitely want to talk to you about your work there. I just want to say these changes that you're suggesting don't even sound expensive to me. I mean, it sounds like really basic changes you can make. And I didn't even realize that you had that certification, and that is a job where somebody can go to a set and do everything that you're talking about. I mean, that is really fascinating. I mean, nowadays it's like intimacy coordinators are all the rage.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's talking about those coordinators. And I feel like that's just come into the cultural zeitgeist of people saying that's an interesting idea, to protect people on set in those situations. But what you're suggesting is the same idea, but with respect to children on set, and just protecting them. And that's really interesting to me. And I think, those changes should absolutely be implemented. And I do know about the labor laws, and I think it's so crazy that the people we need to protect the most are not protected in this arena. And I think part of it, honestly, is people seeing kids acting and being like, that kid's lucky, or that kid's just earned their college tuition, they should, they're a star, they're so lucky. And that's often not the case, as you've pointed out. I mean, things can really affect children in those environments.
Well, and we can hold multiple truths that there absolutely might be really incredible elements to this. And the curated image that we see as consumers is truly just 1% of what it actually looks like. And there are, unfortunately, just like with any household in the States or anywhere around the world, you don't know what's happening behind closed doors. And when we have laws that assume that every guardian has their child's best interest or even knows what that would look like in different scenarios, it leaves so much room for, horrible things to unfold. But that's now what I'm seeing, particularly in social media spaces, where children are having their actual lives, not a character's, but their actual lives, their medical conditions, their school, graduation ceremonies, all of their real life tantrums documented and shared.
All of their mistakes, all of the spilt milk, the funny thing falling down the slide. Yeah, absolutely.
And the research shows that this data, as it's aggregated, it is used to profile them for the rest of their future. So that means certain schools might be looking at who gets admitted or not admitted based on content and information aggregated through these digital platforms. That means down the road, their professional reputation might be affected by something that their aunt said about them on Facebook 12 years ago when they were a child and maybe were just quote unquote misbehaving according to her. And so these are the kinds of permanent footprints that you can't remove. And similar to, young actors who experienced this in the public eye and dealt with parasocial relationships with fans and issues around privacy and safety. Well, now this is happening to children and really all of us everywhere. And similarly, there was no manual in the entertainment industry, and we've collectively not shared any kind of digital literacy manual, no orientation to the powerful device that's in our hands, and also how it's designed to be addictive and how it hijacks our own core needs for belonging and social connection and these, rapid dopamine hits. And, it's like there's a lot here that I crave becomes common knowledge so that people can be just more consciously aware of how they're participating in all of these spaces.
Yeah, I mean, the thing, listen, I'm one of those parents who's like, I don't judge what other parents do and do what you feel is best for your child. I don't put my kids on social media for all of the above reasons. But also, I'm just so worried about deep fakes and child pornography and all of this stuff where I'm just like, it makes me sick to my stomach to think about. And I just, I'm trying to keep them off of there. And I wonder, sometimes I wonder if, my daughter especially, who says, oh, I want to be an actor. And, you made that cute video for her, Alyson, that she likes watching over and over and to show her friends when we were at VidCon. But she, I really worry. I worry that maybe in a few years she'll say, Mom, why didn't you put any pictures of me on social media? I want to be, it's funny because I wonder if that's going to happen. But as the parent, I know better. I know best, frankly. And so I'll just let her know that I didn't think it was appropriate for a number of reasons for us, for our family. What other families do is obviously their business. But yeah, I hear you on all those concerns. And so you are... what's amazing is you're not just talking about this stuff. You're not just saying we need legislation and we need these protections in place. You're actually doing something about it. And I will say you're my only client that is working to get legislation passed. So that's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah. And that's, particularly the Kidfluencer Protection Act. So tell us about the advocacy work you're doing and this act in particular.
Yes. So there are a number of bills that are going to be introduced, and some at state level, some at federal level. And they tend to fall into two categories when we're referring to children online. One category views children as consumers of media and consumers of, the content. The other category is children as producers of said media. And so while I am in full support of protecting all kids online, these tend to focus on children as the producers of media. And something I like specifically, I've been working with Uniform Law Commission. Sorry, I should not say working with. They are doing all of the work. I have the privilege of being an observer and chiming in if it ever feels useful, but they know what they're doing. And they're trying to establish terminology that makes sure that we don't accidentally exclude certain children from these protections by saying something like Kidfluencer and then having a family claim, well, my child doesn't want to be an influencer. We're just a family. So I like that they're starting to use terms like life story services because it will encompass all of the documentation happening of the child, even if the child themselves isn't desiring to be a performer, desiring to, play a role in an industry. And so there are a couple different areas. Of course, I would love to see lots of different kinds of protections, but it's such a complicated system, and I'm learning a lot about the red tape, etc. But we're focusing on the finances. So the kid influencer industry at the moment, I believe, is over $8 billion.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me one bit.
Yeah, and unfortunately, most of that money is not going to the children. So we want to establish something semi-akin to what the Coogan account is for child actors. And there's kind of a somewhat complicated formula for figuring out how to do that. Yeah. And then the other aspect that people have been discussing is a consent calendar, the right for the child upon turning 18 to revoke consent of any content that was shared of them when they were younger. Now, the reality of that is that once content is up there, the data is out. And
that's
people
what I
can
was just
download,
thinking.
reshare. But it's a step toward some level of helping the young person establish, agency and reclaim what is and isn't publicly available of them online. So would I like to see further protections around, not just for children, honestly, but all of us around tech design needing to be reflective of our neurobiology as opposed to hijacking it. Like, I wish there were more ethical parameters outlined there, but one step at a time.
Yeah, and just for our listeners quickly, the Coogan Act is simply, just to put it very simply, is a law in California where your parents have to put aside a certain amount of a minor's earnings. I don't believe it's federal. I think it's California specific. I'll need to double check that. But anyways, parents have to put a certain amount of a kid's earnings into a trust that they can access when they become adults. And so in that way, it allows the children to have access to money that they rightfully earned, as opposed to having, family members spend all of the money that they worked so hard for. So that's the Coogan Act. It's the Kidfluencer world is definitely an interesting space right now. And when you say kids as producers, do you mean kids appearing in the content?
Kids as producers refers to, yes, them being captured in the content and a part of the distribution vehicle. So, they're not literally executive producing or directing a piece of content, but they are a part of the production of the content.
Cool. Interesting. So let's talk about you in social media. So now you're an adult and you get to, pick and choose what you want to do. And you have successfully made this transition. I know that you had your experience as a child actor and you dropped out of that and you had to heal and you had to get better. And I know that you went through like a very difficult time in between, sort of dropping out of Hollywood, getting yourself better. And now you've made this transition to social media. And I've heard you say that, social media, things like social media is the best vehicle to communicate to the world, and that you get to, write, direct, produce, be in control of your own content. And so how did that transition happen into social media for you?
Well, before I answer that, I would say I stand by what I said with many caveats, and it deserves some context, which I'll add here.
Yes, please do.
So, I didn't technically ever take a break besides being in a treatment center for recovery. I simultaneously was finishing up certain contracts in the traditional media space while figuring out how I could resource myself to claim a little bit more agency over, my output creatively. So I started a YouTube channel, and this is, so many years ago at this point. But I really committed to applying a hyper-disciplined approach to the digital space. And, I went on YouTube University and took all kinds of courses and classes and taught myself any and everything you had to know to get by with, of course, integrating my experience of being in production. And was adamant about posting consistently, following at the time what the best practices were, and continuing to evolve as we learned new things. And it did scale in a way that I couldn't accomplish in traditional media, where so many variables were beyond my control. Here at that time, before it was hyper-saturated, there was an opportunity.
When was that, Alyson? Like, what can you remember when you started posting on YouTube?
I think I'm going to loosely say I was early 20s-ish, so more than 10 years ago.
Okay.
And a lot, of course, has unfolded since then. And now we're like collectively in this era of everyone needs a personal brand. And now it's like the algorithms are begging to be fed all day, every day. And, I didn't at the time understand that I still technically wasn't owning what I was producing because it lived on a platform. And now that, of course, those videos can be used to train AI. Like, there's a lot of variables here now to sift through. But I will say, in terms of storytelling and being able to launch a different company and find an audience, yes, it created the opportunity to relay a message directly, to remove the middleman, the middle company. And I also think that in my previous career, the image that I had was quite pigeonholed. And so people had a very narrow understanding of what I could offer. And I knew that I had this, other vision for a mental health company and all of these other skill sets that, frankly, to me often feel more valuable than my work just dancing, which is beautiful. And for some, that is the highest expression.
I mean,
and it's incredible.
Your dancing is incredible. I mean, we still want to see Alyson Stoner dancing. We want to see the advocacy work, but we got to keep the dancing too.
Yeah, I can deliver it as a rap and add some movement. So I think that's around my mid-20s and then into my late 20s. And it was a hustle. I don't necessarily recommend that lifestyle to anyone, but I had to show up for the cause because no one else at the time even knew that I was capable of it. You kind of had to prove yourself for quite some time before people went, oh, I think there's something here. And now with the book, I think, it only took 10 quick years for, I think, this transition to really, I feel rooted in a fundamentally different place in the ecosystem now. I'm no longer just an artist hoping for an audition someday and feeling disempowered from all the rejection.
You're in control of your own destiny, right? Which is, and I've seen it, and I wasn't just saying this at the top of the episode, but I've seen that evolution in you, and I've seen you grow. I mean, it sounds, at the risk of sounding condescending, it's not like that at all, but really seen you come into your own as a person and say, like, this is who I am and these are the things that are important to me. And yeah, I mean, let's get to the book. I mean, congratulations on your
Thank
memoir.
you.
I mean, how, like, are you even 30 yet and you have a memoir? That's amazing. What a life you have lived. It's
silly, right?
It's amazing. So it's called Semi Well-Adjusted Despite Literally Everything. How did the book come about? How did that happen and transpire?
Thanks for helping with the deal.
Yeah.
I
of course,
realized,
it's just part of the job. I'm just happy we're putting this out into the world.
Yes, me too. I think I'm excited. I'm a little nervous, but you can't control
it's
the
like
consequences.
You're showing everyone your baby. It's like, I get it. This is so personal to you.
So personal. I now understand what my peers were feeling with certain albums and certain releases, where I was like, I thought I had been open in previous interviews over the years, but this, it's whoo-wee. I can't believe that I decided to be this honest in ink.
Now you're like, stop the presses. No. It's too late, Alyson. I'm sorry. It's too late.
It is too late. It's now going to take on a life of its own, and I hope that it has a beautiful trajectory. But
yeah, I'm sure
it was
it
actually...
will.
I feel hopeful, and I don't say that often about anything related to creative endeavors. But I had been researching across media culture and child development and neurobiology, et cetera, for about 7 years. And I had crafted an initial proposal with a different name. And eventually, no one was interested. And I even actually adapted it to be a television pilot pitch, and no one was interested. And so I thought, okay, you know what? I'm ready to let it go. I'm going to set this on the shelf, and it's just time to move forward. Maybe no one needs to hear this. And then one of my literary agents resurfaced it and said, actually, following Jeanette McCurdy's release, I think people are ready for this, and it's, more timely than ever because of the digital landscape. And so I very reluctantly agreed to start writing the full-length manuscript. And it was, over 14 months of, it's not an exaggeration to say, agonizing, painful.
I mean, I can imagine.
It was just,
yeah.
And this is I thought I knew what I wanted to say already, so I thought, well, I've processed this in therapy for 20 years. Like, I should be able to get through it. Right. But the writing process itself is its own grueling set of decisions. And, what dots are you going to connect? What lessons do you want to convey? What perspective are you going to take of your own history? And I think one of the most challenging components was knowing I'm speaking about real people who are still alive. Some of them are named in these pages. How do I do this with dignity, but also without defending them unnecessarily at the expense of my own lived experience? And that, as a, trained people pleaser and perfectionist as a kid actor, like, that was tough.
I mean, that sounds like a tightrope I do not want to walk. That is, I don't wish it on anyone. Yeah, that's difficult. I can't imagine. But you also have to speak your truth, right? Like,
Yeah. And some of my peers have already come forward about certain things. So this felt less like trying to control the narrative or change it, and more so just rounding it out and saying, hey, I was there too, and I had some different takeaways. Here are mine. And then, people can make sense of it as they wish. But really, the heart of the book is so much more than some of the anecdotes. So I think people will show up maybe to know what happened on the set of Camp Rock. But I hope they stay for the substance.
Yeah, and I think they will, because, like I said before, the way you communicate those things are, the substance of it and the mental health aspect of it is very digestible and very sort of easy to consume. And that, is a great talent to have, to be able to do that. So what do you want people's takeaway from the book to be?
Sure. Well, I was speaking with a friend this morning, actually, and she's read the manuscript. So you're next, I promise. And she...
Yes. I'm waiting for my
said,
PDF.
That's right. I can send you that.
Yes.
But you said you wanted a signed copy.
Well, I did want a signed copy. Well, I want that too, but I'm dying to read it because I feel like now it's building and the pre-orders are out and like all of that. And now I'm getting like super excited. But yeah, I'd love to hear what your friend was saying.
So my friend said after reading, she's found herself... there are notes from the pages that are simply lingering. And she said, I don't yet have a clear takeaway as to if my mind has shifted about certain things, but I will say when I see young people on screen, when I think about these themes, something is stirring. And that is what I'm interested in. I don't actually want to spoon feed you an answer because I don't assume that I have the full answer on what's going on here. I think this has to be a collaborative conversation where we start to unearth these ideas that have been so deeply embedded in our culture, things around fame, success, purpose, childhood, stardom, etc. And let's just let something churn a bit and see what emerges dynamically when we're in conversation with each other. So that's one aspect. I'm really hoping for deep reflection. Another aspect is, yes, while my life experience might be highly unusual, there are, of course, going to be universal human development topics and themes, a lot of them centering mental well-being and physical well-being. So I'm hoping that people will be able to find their own healing journey threaded into the pages. And then finally, I think you get to the end and you have all of this material about all of these different things. And I find myself hoping that people ask, what does it even mean to be well-adjusted if the society is dysfunctional? Do we want to actually be well-adjusted here, or do we need to find our own unique way into reimagining a better future that looks different?
That's such a beautiful way to approach it and look at it. And I find people who are not well-adjusted far more interesting. For many different reasons, right? Because everyone has their own story to tell and has been affected by certain things, and are often, those people are very funny. And I don't know, I see what you're saying, but well-adjusted, maybe overrated.
I like the way you put that. Yes, I agree. At this point, I do think that it's overrated. And I actually think in some ways it can be a bit harmful if the systems themselves are, dangerous to people or in some ways dehumanizing people. Well, then we don't want to adjust to that. We want to do things differently.
We want to rebel. Absolutely. Look, I look at my kids and I joke and mention my kids in every podcast, age 7 and 5, but they will fully be in therapy when they're older. And you know what? I hope for that, because it's incredibly helpful to discover yourself and to become more self-aware. I've been in therapy for years. It's helped me so much. So I don't think, I don't think, again, being well-adjusted, what does that really mean? But I also think that talking to professionals, being self-aware, being introspective is also so important to becoming the person that somebody is meant to be. And so that brings us to Movement Genius. I definitely want to touch on Movement Genius, and then we're going to move into a fun lightning round and lighten things up a little bit, because we've been having this amazing conversation about these really important topics. Movement Genius, you are a founder of a company.
Yes.
And what's interesting about Movement Genius is I feel like it recently, in the last few years, maybe 2 or 3 years, people have started to really emphasize, and maybe it was because of COVID, but just moving your body, right? Which seems like, of course, you're supposed to move your body. It seems like common sense, but I think there's a much bigger focus on any type of movement being helpful.
Yes. And of course, so the premise of Movement Genius, we had, two driving components. One of them is that mental health often excludes the body. And in reality, of course, thoughts, feelings, life experiences are stored in our body. We experience them in our muscles flexing and releasing, and in our patterns of breathing changing, and in the way we take up space or make space for others, and our body language. So there are all these deeply automatic, instinctive cues going on all day long, every day. But then we wanted to be sure that, okay, if we're going to support someone's mental well-being, we must include their nervous system and their body. But further, we have to make sure that we're not just designing tools that only work for some bodies. Mental health, notoriously, to no one's surprise because of the systems we inhabit, caters to a very narrow group of people, and class and this and that and the other, all the things we know. And so my sister and I recognize, actually, it would be a disservice for us to start yet another white, female-founded, non-disabled company.
Focus on Pilates and CrossFit.
Yes, and drinking the green smoothies and wearing yoga pants and sure, this isn't a blanket. I'm not wholly against that fundamentally.
Sure.
Generally,
but you want to
speaking.
be more inclusive.
Well, not only inclusive by saying, hey, we bring in practitioners of color, or hey, we have queer practitioners, but down to the actual fundamental design of the platform. We went through a couple different accelerators that were equity focused, liberation focused, they were accessibility minded. And so we were learning about tech features and design. We were thinking about, the financial structures and business models in a way that was fundamentally countercultural to typical Silicon Valley startup. So I feel, thankful for all the people who brought all of this information to our attention at the beginning. So it didn't have to be an afterthought of, oh, oops, we just contributed further to health inequity. It was like, oh no, this is our baseline. And so now we have over 300 videos that are designed with therapists and experts, and you can use them on demand, mental and emotional health tools, things like Headspace or Calm, but for mental and emotional health. So easy to use and find. And then we also do our virtual classes and now in-person programs with, it could be a hospital one day, a university the next day, an organization somewhere else the following day. And putting on the hat of founder, was quite intimidating. I did not have the business acumen that my sister did, but I knew I wanted to contribute. And so I went on a deep, I should actually say it's a steep learning curve. And I had to learn a lot on the job. Thankfully, my sister, is helping operationalize things. But, we're still, it's just us too, really running this thing. And I'm so grateful to see the impact. But yes, in relation to movement, we wanted to broaden the definition so that it wasn't assumed that it needed to be fitness or that it needed to be no pain, no gain mentality, that this is reconnecting your mind and body and understanding what small or big adjustments you can make over the course of any given day that substantially help your quality of life, your ability to manage stress, and to actually get by feeling resilient as opposed to completely helpless in your own mind and body.
Yes, and you articulated everything that I was trying to say when I said movement's good for you.
Great, I'm glad.
Yes, you did a much better job than I did, but that's exactly it. Yes, connecting movement to mental health and just moving your body. And what I'm trying to do every day too, I do work out on a regular basis and try to stay healthy, but I'm trying to go for a walk after lunch. And honestly, just to get up and move my body around the block has made a huge difference for me mentally. And so, yeah, it's I'm really trying to integrate more of that stuff into my life, but just even the small stuff can make a huge difference. It definitely gives me a clarity when I get back that I wouldn't have had if I had just continued to kind of sit or stay in the office. So, yeah, excited. We'll definitely, provide all the links to the Movement Genius. We'll provide all the handles, et cetera, and the links. And yeah, it's awesome to be a small part of, that watching your company grow and helping it grow and working with your sister too, who's fabulous. She's great. So yeah, that's congratulations for that as well. So yeah, I've kept you for a while. I'm gonna keep you a little longer. We're gonna do a fun lightning round to end the podcast. So we had started asking people the same set of questions, and then we realized that we really need to tailor them to be specific to the guest. And so, so these are tailored for you. So here we go. There's how many? 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 6 questions. All right. These are very serious, Alyson. So prep yourself.
Okay.
What is the most challenging dance move that you have ever mastered?
Oh, there are so many that are challenging that I have not mastered. It's probably anything with breaking. So I know many people refer to it as break dancing, but in the community, we refer to it as breaking.
Oh, interesting.
Or break in.
Well, the old folks like me still call it break dancing.
Well, it's actually, so the OGs are who refer to it as break in.
Interesting.
So, yeah, but I understand once it kind of like got commercialized and, it takes on a bit of a life of its own. But just so my mentors don't get mad at me, I think probably learning the 6-step and, a baby freeze, which is what I did in the Missy video. That was, a moment of pride as a little mini breaker. But I didn't go on to actually keep training. I do know a lot of people who are incredible breakers, and I constantly crave not only their like agility and flexibility and athleticism, but also just like the sheer creativity they have. Dancers are the most amazing artist athletes to me on the planet.
Absolutely. And so you brought up Missy Elliott. What is one word to describe working with Missy Elliott? Like one of the coolest people on the planet.
The word that comes to mind is warmth. Because yes, she was dripping in diamonds and had such an impressive discography, but her presence was so soft and warm and subtle even. Humility, I think, is something that she offers to everyone.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, not to mention she's so incredibly talented. So to hear that the humility part is nice. Is there a role that you wish you had gotten?
Yes, read chapter, whatever it is in the book. One of the roles that really meant a lot to me, I was a fan of the Hunger Games series. And I think it was specifically because Katniss was this strong female lead whose appearance wasn't really the main event, and she wasn't trying to be desirable to the male gaze. She was out here with tactical skills, for survival purposes, but also had this revolutionary spirit. And, now that I've deconstructed a lot of different things, like I can psychoanalyze the Hunger Games series in a lot of different ways. But at the time...
That's another podcast we should do at some point.
Yes. But I was certainly a fan of the book, and I thought, coming from an athletic background and wanting to play to the top of my intelligence, it seemed like such a special opportunity. And of course, it is and was for Jennifer Lawrence and also for all the other contenders. Like they had
I can
so
imagine
many
that
people.
That was a sought after role, I bet. So what is your favorite way to de-stress after a long day?
If I'm being honest,
yes.
I like to sit alone in my car.
Oh my God, you're so LA.
Really?
It's so, sit alone in your car. Yeah, that's so interesting.
Well, it's because over the years, it's been hard for me to find a sense of home in other spaces. And the thing that's been most consistent in my life is this same lovely car that I drive.
That's so cool.
And so I find that it feels a bit like my own little cave.
Like a little cocoon.
Yes, but I specifically keep it off, and there is no AC. So I like to cook. I like to bake in my car.
It doubles as your sauna. Yeah.
Yes. If I'm glistening by the time I get out, even better. But there's something about the cocoon and the warmth that's like very soothing to me. And I can be in there for hours.
Oh, yeah. Wow. That's awesome. And just two more. What's a song that always gets you dancing?
So I'm not much of an upbeat kind of person.
You're
love
not a pop
mid-tempo.
girl?
Not really. I'm more like R&B, soul, mid-tempo.
Oh, interesting. I wouldn't have guessed that. I would have thought you like kind of like the real dance, like poppy beats.
So do many others.
Yeah.
It is not my truth.
We have discovered a secret, a complete unknown about Alyson Stoner. I love this.
It's true. Yeah. And I'll say, besides dancing to like moving to ambient meditative instrumentals for de-stressing, I usually put on, I think it's just called Chill Soul playlist. And I'll give a shout out to my friend Jojo, who just released a song with Craig David. I don't know if you're familiar with Craig David. He's been in the game for decades, and so it was amazing to hear their voices.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. That's great. And this is the last question. And this is kind of a funny one because we ask everybody this one. But the thing is, you're doing so many different things. So we say, if you weren't a creator, what would you be? So for you, it's, okay, if you weren't a creator, a founder, if you weren't a creator and a founder and a published author, what would you do?
So here's the truth. After this book campaign, I actually am trying to take my first break ever since working at 6 years old. And I want to be able to discover something entirely new. So I'm not actually sure what that might look like. But I will say I love things that are community-centered. I absolutely love research. And I'm talking about give me the bone-dry research. Just scrumptious to me. And then I would say maybe I'm curious about skills that are tactile. Like I want to learn the guitar. Also, by the way, I want to learn American Sign Language. Like, right. I have a lot of things that I want to do.
You started out by saying that you're going to take a break, but this all sounds like work.
Well, that sounds like a break to me because it's finally doing things for funsies.
For fun. Yeah, for funsies. That's so great. I feel like I see travel in your future. I think maybe you go to like a foreign country, like go to India. India is the place where everybody goes to just like get away and like discover like all these amazing things. And I've been to India twice, so I could speak to it and it's part of my background. But I feel like maybe that should be your next destination.
It's funny you should say India because the only time I've been there was for a business trip.
Oh, yeah.
So I can go and have a different experience. I did yesterday. I was looking at tickets to Japan. I thought that would be so special after the book campaign. But, of course, right as I was clicking purchase or to reserve it, I opened my email to a work gig right on that day. Next March. I'm like, this is how many months out? So I'm just gonna have to learn that at some point you have to go. You just have to go.
Yeah, exactly. You have to go and leave it to your team. Leave it to us. We will be here to manage the pieces. And thank you so much, Alyson, for taking the time. We took a lot of time today to speak, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate you and working with you. And I can't wait till the book comes out and to see everything else you're doing, and you will continue to do, and the new stuff you're going to do. And so, again, thank you so much.
Thank you. And I can't wait for this to be the #1 podcast across all categories.
Signed, Conversations with Digital Mavericks. This episode was produced by myself and Phoebe Dunn. Creative producer, Khairi Williams. Technical production support provided by Seth Richardson. Edited by Rachel Miller-Howard and Carmine Mattia. Social media strategy by Maureen Lauren Sedlak. And signed theme music by Carmine Mattia.